All right, today I'm going to be showing you how to install Archlinux on your physical computer the easy way. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but we're going to also set up our networking as well as users on this new Archlinux based installation. Now this has become a lot easier over the years as we now have the Archlinux install script, which we're going to be using. If you want the manual way, this is not going to be for you. Anyways, we'll start right out by going to the Archlinux downloads. That's at archlinux.org under the download section. And the first thing you'll read about is the current release, which every month you get a new release. So 12.01 is their latest. We're running kernel 6.12 and the size of the ISO is going to be 1.1 gigs. You'll want to go to the HTTPS mirrors below. And if you just keep scrolling down, you'll notice that there's a ton of mirrors. Select one closest to you that you believe is from a known university and or company. And once you've found one, we're going to be selecting the Archlinux x86-64. This is for an x86 instruction set, 64-bit CPU. So you'll make sure your physical computer matches that. Click that and the download will start as soon as you hit save. Once we're finished downloading, go to a computer where you can flash this image from. Use a tool like Balena Etcher, Rufus, or UNetBootin to do this. You can get it offline pretty easily. I'm using Balena Etcher myself. I just launched the app, which is super easy to use. You just select the image that you just got done downloading. Here's the image. I hit open. Then I select a device that I want to put this on. This is my USB. Just make sure it has nothing on it because it's going to overwrite everything on it, and make sure that it's at least above 4 gigs or so because we know the ISO is at least a gig. And finally, you just hit the flash button and that's going to ask you for administrative privileges. So you hit yes, and the start of the flashing process is going to begin. All right, and once you're booting into your physical computer, make sure to spam the F12 key, F2, F10, one of those to get you into BIOS or the quick select menu. For example, this is the BIOS settings. We're going to reorganize things so I get the proper boot order. This is specifically for a Dell computer. Yours might look different. And all I'm searching for here is something related to boot. For example, I see that I have the boot sequence. Notice I have some mention of a USB. I'm going to take that, move it straight up to the top so that I can use that USB device. I'm going to hit apply, hit OK, exit, and that should restart things so I can boot into that USB that I just got done flashing. And while things are booting up, I'm just going to spam the F12 key. Yours might be F10, yours might be F2, but you want to get to the quick boot menu so you can select the USB you just got done flashing. Reference your motherboard if you need help, but on Dells, it's F12 to get into the fast boot menu. Otherwise, F10 or F2 to get into the full boot menu. This makes it really easy to select the USB that I just got done flashing. If I go down to the UEFI here, verbatim store and go, that's what the USB is called. So that's perfect. That's the one I need. I'm just going to press enter and that should start the process of loading into Archlinux. And we can definitely see that here as we have a few options to select from. We're now booting into the proper portion of the media. There's Archlinux install medium and a second option with speech if you want it, but you want to select the first option if you can, and that will load into the installer. Now it may take a few moments as things are getting ready to boot up. It's got to go through a few things before we're able to enter into the installer. This is all fine. As you see things scrolling across your screen, it just checks to make sure that things activate and start properly. If for some reason you need to log in, you just type in root. That'll get you right in. And from here, it starts getting easier. There's a few notes that are made. For Wi-Fi, you have to authenticate the Wi-Fi network using the IWCTL utility. Otherwise, it should be automatically connected if you have Ethernet. So I suggest using Ethernet to your physical computer if you can. If not, run IWCTL, press enter, and then you can type in device list. That'll give you all the available Wi-Fi adapters on your computer. I have this WLAN 0, so that's my physical adapter that I can use in order to actually get Wi-Fi. The power says it's on, so I'm all good there. I don't have to enable the wireless interface. It's already enabled, but now I can scan by using the scan command, which I type in station space WLAN 0 based off of what was given to me that's available for wireless cards. And then I type in scan. That'll start the scan. And then I have to do station WLAN 0 and get dash networks. This is going to see what available networks I have during the scan process. Now I have a bunch of Wi-Fi's available to me. The next thing you'll do is you'll type in station space WLAN 0 for your adapter, connect space, and then between the parentheses, type in your SSID that's listed as the network name that you want to connect to. Next, you'll be asked for the password for the Wi-Fi network. Start typing in that password. Once you have it in, press enter. We can now exit after you've typed in the password, and we're back to the root console. That way we can continue with the install process. let's make sure we can ping something. So for example, ping google.com. If you can, you're going to receive packets back. This means a successful connection to the internet. Fantastic work. Why connect to the internet? Well, you may need some packages. Now we're really ready to start our installation. In order to start, all you have to do is type in archinstall and press enter. This is a great script that does almost everything for you. We're going to get walked through the entire process of installing Archlinux. Again, this will make things a lot easier to install. So first off, we get to select a language. You press enter, and if you need to, go through and select a different language. If you don't need it, you can hit escape to go back. For the locales, make sure you press enter and confirm that you have the proper keyboard layout, local, locale, language, and locale encoding. Then you can go back. These are very simple if you just hit enter. If you ever need to go back, just press escape or look for the back key. After your locales, you can set mirrors. For example, if I had a mirror region that I wanted to specifically select, I can hit enter and then select the country that I want to install from. For example, the closest mirror for me is going to be United States. So if I press space and press enter, that should get things going for me. Then I'm going to hit back, and you can see a plus being added by everything that either has a default already or you have something selected for. So disk configuration is missing. That's the next section. I'm just going to hit enter on that and go to the partitioning. Now it's got 3 options. Use a best effort default partition layout, manual, or pre-mounted. I'm just going to use best effort. And here you might notice that there's many different options. Well, be careful not to select the improper storage disk, because this is where you can really mess things up. This will erase the entire contents of a storage disk, and you will not be able to get anything back on that storage if you select the improper one. I know the one I want to install is a 240 gig solid state drive, and that adds up to be this SunEast SC900. So I'm going to select that, press space, and use that to be where I want to install things. I press enter after I've selected the proper drive, and then select which file system you want. If you don't really know the difference between these, I suggest just going with ext4 formatted for your file system. Press enter, and now it asks, would you like to create a separate partition for home? The default here is no, but for those of you who want to separate users from the system files, meaning the home users directory from the system file directory, you can choose yes. Otherwise, no, the default. So I pressed enter, and now it's just giving me a breakdown of what's about to happen. It's going to use the best effort default partition layout. It's going to create a 1 gig boot partition, and then the rest is going to be filled in for my root partition. Very good. That all looks all right. So now I'm done partitioning. I'm going to hit back, and notice this configuration is also a plus now. Disk encryption is next. It says no encryption. That's fine. You can if you want. There's Lukes available. I'm going to keep it without encryption, and then swap on ZRAM is enabled by default. I'm going to keep this. Next is the bootloader selection. You can use system deboot, grub, or any of the others. Grub might be your friend if you have more than one Linux distribution on the system already, but it also might interfere with things. Since I'm just going to select this to be my primary boot device anyway, I'm just going to use system deboot, the default. I don't need unified kernel images enabled. My host name, I'm actually going to change, so I'm going to press enter. And it says host name, Archlinux, and backspace, and change that to SavvyNick. That's what I want this computer to be called. The root password is set next, so press enter. Make sure to put in a root password, and then press enter. Confirm that password a second time, and press enter. Now we have a root password. A user account, make one if you want. I do suggest doing this, so I'm just going to hit add user. I'm going to create a new user called SavvyNick, and then I'm going to put their password in as well, and confirm that password. Now it's asking us, should SavvyNick be a super user? Sudo. I would tell most people to go ahead and put yes. This means that this user has root access or super privileged access to do extra commands on the system that wouldn't be available to you if you weren't a super user. You probably need one basic user who has super user privileges. Otherwise, if you're going to put in multiple users, you might not need this one because you could select it for a different user, for example. And if you really don't want it, then a user has to log in with the root user's name, root, and its default password. Anyways, I'm just going to press enter, yes, and then I'm going to go down to the confirm and exit. Following that, we can go to profile and hit type. There are different types of profiles: desktop, minimal, server, and Xorg. So all this really means is these are profiles that select how much is going to get installed at first with your system. When you select main profile and you hit desktop, minimal, server, or Xorg, this just means the desktop is a full-fledged desktop experience. That way you can play with the desktop environment, have a GUI to work with. Otherwise, minimal is going to have less software packages, only the minimal to run. Server is going to be just a console, and Xorg is just a Windows server alone, where basically you plan on adding your own environment after the fact. You can go with any of these. Most of us are going to go with the desktop because you might want to work with some desktop environment already. If I hit enter, then I'm going to get to select many other things, including which desktop environment I want to run. For example, if I want KDE Plasma, it's going to tell me all the packages that are going to come with KDE Plasma. If you don't know of all the available desktop environments, just go through and do a quick Google search just to see what things look like on these various different desktop environments. Some are meant for low-end systems that don't require a lot of memory usage or processing. Others have very high resource usage, so you wouldn't want to select the wrong one. I'm going to go with KDE Plasma, which is a more modern, mid-weight desktop environment, and then I'm going to press enter. Following that, I have graphics drivers and a greeter. First off, with the graphics drivers, I'm going to press enter because I actually have an NVIDIA graphics card. So it's important to select for whatever you have. By default, you can go with all open source, which means AMD, Intel, and other integrated graphics processors are already included. But since I have NVIDIA, it is very important that I go over to the proprietary or the Nuveo driver. Nuveo is just the open source driver. Proprietary is typically better with NVIDIA, so I'm actually going to make a selection for this. And if you have a newer GPU, you can go with the open kernel module for newer GPUs. Again, proprietary is usually the best, at least for NVIDIA, so I'm going to go with that. Following that, I can select a greeter if you have one in mind. By default, SDDM is selected. You can go with a different type of greeter if you're used to it. Otherwise, just stay with the default, which I'm doing. Finally, after that's all done, we hit back and we're back to the main screen after selecting our profiles. Audio's next. You can select Pipewire or Pulse Audio. Pipewire is what I'm going with, as it is a newer modern interface that can work with sound and audio. Kernel is going to be the Linux kernel. Don't need to change that. Network configuration. I'm just going to copy the network configuration to the installation since I already set that up. So I'm going to press enter here. If you haven't already set it up, you can do your manual configuration or use Network Manager in order to do it graphically. Additional packages. If there are additional packages that you know about, you can enter them in. I'm not bothering with this. Optional repositories. Again, if you have other repositories that you want to install, including the testing or the multi-lib, you can select them here. You probably don't know what that is if you're new to this install process, so don't go messing around and finding out unless you do some research. Anyways, set your time zone. For me, I'm going to do US Alaska. This is close enough. And just press enter. And then automatic time sync. You can disable this if you want, but I'm going to keep my time synced. This option here allows you to save the configuration onto the system or a USB, for example. Otherwise, you can hit the install option and you're just going to be asked one more time whether you want to apply this configuration. As long as you have the proper storage device selected, things should go all right. So I'm going to press yes because I'm very confident. And it says here in 3, 2, 1, it's wiping the partitions and creating the new partitions necessary to create this install of Archlinux. Now this is going to take a while, as it's got to go through quite a few things to install packages and the kernel and get things from the internet. And it all depends on what you actually had selected during the process. Those of you who don't have a desktop environment selected, well, it's going to make things a little easier on you because it doesn't need as many packages installed. But anyways, at this point, we're going to reconvene when any questions get asked, if any at all. Otherwise, I'll see you on the other side of the installation. So now I've made it through the first portion where it's installed the system files to properly run Archlinux. But now, as you can see, it says Plasma Workspace is installing, so another 2 gig is being installed here as I chose to install the KDE Plasma desktop environment. So this is going to take another few minutes. The first process took about 10 minutes. Now I'm at the point where it's installing the NVIDIA proprietary drivers. As you can tell here, it says NVIDIA Utilities 565. That just means version 565, which is the latest and greatest drivers for the graphics card. You may go past this point since some of you might not see this just because you have a different graphics card. And now we're almost ready to start our newly installed Arch Linux system. But it's asking us, would you like to chroot into a newly created installation and perform a post-installation configuration? For advanced users, yeah, you can do this. But otherwise, just choose the default, no, and press enter. At this point, you may see something in green. It says installation completed without any errors. Log files temporarily available at varlog archinstall. You may reboot when ready. So we're still in our install environment. In order to get out of this, we're going to have to type in sudo space reboot. But before we do, I want to mention one thing, and that is to remove the USB media device that you have in your computer that's actually installing Arch Linux for you. You wouldn't want that in because it might boot back into that installation media. If it's easier for you to remove it by shutting things down, just do sudo shutdown now, which will completely shut things down, remove the media, then start up your computer. You'll also want to make sure that you're booting into the proper device. If you have more than one storage device, you're going to want to select the proper one. Either way, whatever method you choose, go ahead and do it now. Since I have multiple devices, I'm going to actually spam that F12 key. That's going to get me into the quick boot menu here on Dell. And you'll notice I took out my USB stick, which is the store and go. And now I have this UEFI SunEast 256 gig storage device. This is where Arch Linux is located, at least for me. So I'm going to boot into that. And look at that. It says here, Arch Linux. Then there's a Linux fallback or reboot into firmware interface. That just means in a BIOS. I'm just going to hit enter for Arch Linux. Yours might actually get past that pretty quick because it has a automatic load. This is the login screen for my KDE Plasma desktop. Right now you can tell up top it's saying it's using Wayland as the default display server. Fantastic. That means I have the latest and greatest. So in order to log in, I'll just type in my user password, which I created during the install script, and press enter. And here we go. Things are loading up and looking great. And if you've made it this far, subscribe below, as you clearly enjoy Linux content and installing Linux. You've successfully installed things. I can start using my desktop environment. I can start installing things here on my Arch-based distribution. How can we tell if this is actually Arch? Well, let's go use something that'll tell us that we're using Arch, by the way, which console here is the terminal. And I can install my first package with Pacman, the default package manager. And I want it to be neofetch. I press enter, and I forgot I'm not currently the root user, so I just need to do sudo. And if I do exclamation point, right behind that, it'll rerun the last command, so I don't have to type it again. Fantastic. Now I can type in my user's password, which should elevate my privileges to the administrative user if I have things properly set up, and it sure did. Awesome. Am I installing it? Yes. And finally, we can run neofetch now to officially see that we are running Arch Linux on my Dell computer. It's been up for 2 minutes. Look at how minimal it is when it comes to packages, only 690, and currently 1.2 gigs of RAM out of 32 gigs of RAM. Congrats on setting up a successful Arch Linux environment. I bet you're pretty excited. Let me know how excited you are and that you use Arch Linux, by the way, in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit the like button if you've made it this far, and subscribe below for more Linux and programming videos. Catch me in a great community on Discord, and I'll catch you in another video. Thanks for watching. Linux can be hard to understand, but I take the most commonly used terms, commands, and subjects in Linux, and I break them down into simple to read documents, including Linux terms, flashcards, a checklist, a cheat sheet, and a mind map. And if you're ready to level up your Linux experience and knowledge, go to learn.savvynick.com now and get access to these sheets.